and welcome to We Women Want, our weekly show where we raise women's issues, we talk to women achievers, we also reach out to those in need and try and find solutions. We cover topics from law and order, from domestic abuse to just even body shaming, to the clothes we wear, to society, to culture, to law. Everything is covered on this show. But today we are going to be taking a look at an age-old debate, that of equality versus reservations. Everybody asks, if women think they're so superior, if they're so more than equal, then why do they want reservations? Well, yes, we do want reservations for the simple reason that there's been an age-old traditions behind us. There's a legacy where women were not considered superior. We were actually told to give treat men as the superior race. We were not treated as equals. To create that level playing field, to bring women up to the same level, I think there is a justification in the demand for reservations. But should it be there in each and every field? Or should it be taken as a case-by-case basis? That is something I'm going to be discussing with my panel today. Joining me for this conversation is Talish Ray. She's a managing partner at the TRS Law Offices. We have Shraddha Malik. She's a wedding planner and the co-founder of the Vivah Wedding Solutions. And Alkan Sridhar. She's a managing partner at the Law Offices of India. Alka, really this conversation came this topic came from a conversation between you and me. So why don't you explain the premise at hand?
See, as a lawyer, I would first like to just lay down the foundation, right? As per our constitution, we have Article 14, equality before law and equal protection of all citizens to the laws in India. Then, that is the premise. That is the origin of the constitution is our Bible, our Ramayana, Mahabharata. It is what we are governed by in all aspects of our lives. Now, that categorically says, to start with, that everybody is equal. Now, we go further on to Article 15, which also says prohibition on basis of any caste, race, place of birth, and more importantly for our conversation, sex, gender, is not allowed. It can't be. But under the same article, we also have subsection 3, which basically says that any state government can make special laws for women and children. Children, I do understand, because they are young and they need to be looked after. But why women? An able-bodied, strong woman. When we say, then we are crying out aloud that we are, and we are equal. Then why the special treatment? You see, so there is a clear paradox in terms of the law, clear paradox. But having said that, then there have been judgments by the court, like the most importantly was this Indra Swani, in which, in para 836, I still remember when I read that judgment, in which the court categorically admitted that reservation implies selection on basis of other factors other than pure merit. But it is a cost that which we have to pay for so many decades and centuries of factors that has put women on a less advantaged position. So there is no doubt that there is a clear paradox in terms of the laws and what the reservation vis-a-vis equality.
Thanks. That's explained it very comprehensively. But Shraddha, you're a wedding planner. You've seen a lot of traditions, even in the place, right from when we were getting married, which places man as the superior of the two in the wedding relationship. So tell us a bit about the traditions and the history, how regressive they are, or are they also changing with the times?
They are changing with the times. Yeah. Earlier, like when you're married, your sole responsibility was to take care of the house, take care of children, produce children, that's all, right? Now, when you're getting married, you do get that support from your in-laws, from your husband to go out and work. They do want to like share your responsibilities, because you can't expect, like if I am a person, the other person is also a person. If he is not expected to get up in the morning, to cook food, to make like everyone's tiffins, to go to work, come back, do the same thing, maybe wash the clothes, do all of that, manage the entire house, and be expected to put in those same amount of work hours and not be expected to get like tired at all, then that is not fair, right? So there is obviously no equality in that section of society, or like in that parameter of life. But I am not very pro reservation. Okay. It's not really required. Like if I want to be equal, I expect to get the same amount of benefits or like disadvantages that the man also has. But at the same time, if I am not given the same amount of work, or if I am not given the same amount of respect, then I can't be expected to do this. Like you can't expect the same outcome if you are not getting the same advantages in life. So at some points, yes, reservation is required, but it should be there at the grassroots levels that we both get the same kickstart. It should be at the levels where we both get the same work responsibilities, we both get the same pay, everything is like equal then, right? If you're going to pay him more just because he's a man, then obviously I want the reservation. Like, I want the benefit that I want an extra longer maternity leave. I want that, you know, I get like, being a girl, I'm told that okay fine, you can go back home at 6 and not, you know, stay the night till like 10:30.
Correct.
So if I have to go back and cook, then I want to go back at 5, right? Because I am human, I also have those 24 hours. But if you're going to give me, like if you're going to make me work till 10, then don't expect me to go home and, you know, cook and do everything else. So reservation is required at grassroots levels, it's required at particular points in life, but it's not the whole and sole reason of my existence, or it's not what I really demand.
Your take on this equality versus reservations debate, where do you stand?
So where do I stand? The first is my objection to the term that you know, equality is everything, because there is equality and then there is equity. There is a difference between the two.
Explain.
Equality basically is that you and I, we are both here. In all senses we are equal, right? So we are women of a certain age, we have a certain background, and everything is the same on the face of it. And you could say that, well, you know, we are also equal in terms of how we are dressed, what we are wearing. Equity is when our sole disadvantages that come across are accounted for. So for example, currently you possibly have thousands of hours on television. I possibly don't. Therefore, true equity would be if I was given a certain more leeway rather than asking to be competing on the same grounds. So the example that we give for equity is like this. You take, you take two people, weigh one of them down with weights and ask them to run the same race. What are the chances that the person without the weight on their feet is likely to win?
Correct.
Right? And that is what equity is. So therefore, in terms of equity, we have to recognize that there are certain structural barriers. Now let's talk about structural barrier number 1. The first, which has been vaguely touched upon, has been the fact that there is structures which are surrounded by patriarchy. I'll give you a simple example. Every child learns the concept of GDP. And GDP is basically what determines, these are basically goods and services that are produced in the country.
I can only think of GDP tax.
Yes. And what we don't take into account in GDP is work that is done by women in the home space, which is non-remunerative. And therefore, even in the press, when you have language saying women started working at this period of time in history, that's not true. Women have always worked. It is just that they work for a non-remunerative, non-structural, non-legalized form, which is known as taking care of the home. So therefore, those structural disadvantages exist as it is. Those structural disadvantages walk in other fashions as well. For example, whoever put out the law that, you know, earlier the understood thing was that office timings would be 9 to 5.
Right.
They've now changed slightly where there is flexi hours and stuff. But the one person who would be maximum in terms of disadvantage, where you had non-flexible hours, and most professions even today have non-flexible hours, would be the person who has a child waiting, who's a caregiver to a child. Now that person could be a man or a woman, but likelihood of it being somebody who identifies with the gender of woman is far more. So therefore, these are structural disadvantages, structural barriers that exist, and for those structural barriers, there needs to be an affirmative action to be able to just give that leg up. Basically give that additional handicap, as it's called in golf, so that you are allowed to play on a level playing field. Beyond that, there is nothing else that I think women are asking for there, and there is a lot of dignity. The other thing that I often see is that, you know, when we talk about affirmative action for women, there is often then you have this thing thrown up about misuse of law. Now that's often very you know, sort of thrown back, that ye law aa jayega, so then, you know, women are going to take advantage of it. That is there for every law, every precedent, every structure that is. Somebody would want to game the system. That doesn't have to do anything to do with the gender of the person. So that's where I stand on the, I definitely demand equity. I do not demand equality.
Okay,
But
very
equality
well
we also have. But going further to what you were saying, that's a very valid point she raised. In one of the insurance cases, you know, there was a death of a wife, and they couldn't really calculate that how much is she of value to the homes. In fact, it was this CGI prior to it, in which he said that it's a very problematic issue, that we don't give any value to the role of a woman. In fact, she's the one who creates the entire household and makes it easy for the husband to go out and earn. If she wasn't an equal supporting partner, he would not be able to go and do what he does.
Correct.
Right.
So the point that she raises very, you know,
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
So I also want to circle back on marriage. And I know that this is very controversial for me to say, and of course I also understand that, you see, as a personal level, here's the disclaimer, I am married, happily so. Having said that, the entire notion of marriage, the way we see it in terms of Indian traditions and more specifically mainstream Hindu traditions, I go back to this particular thing that takes place across from the north to the south called Kanyadan.
Yeah.
Dan
He's
itself
spoken about it also, yes.
implies that I am an arm
I'm an
to be given,
object to be given
in
away.
charity.
Yeah.
Gaudan hota hai, Kanyadan hota hai, Annadan hota hai. These are inanimate things, and I suddenly become an object. And this is the structural barrier that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the fact that I refer back to my own wedding 20 years back, where my very feminist father turned around and said, I'm so sorry, but I will not do a dan of my child. And everybody kept hustling in and saying, it is only for the tradition of it. Just follow the tradition.
Optics.
You know, don't bother. It is not like, you know, your daughter will be equal, and you know that the boy is very nice, and all of that took place. And that is when I found that it is so difficult to defy what has been patriarchal notions and traditions and superstructures that are essentially there. So, I mean, you know, if you go back in a home, right? On a Sunday when somebody rings the bell, the first question is, Mem sahab hai kya?
Yeah.
Right? Ya kya kehte behan ji hai kya? Ya didi ji hai kya? It is never bhaiya hai kya? Unless bhaiya is a bachelor. In which case bhaiya generally is known to avoid things, but then
And Bhaiya will probably have some
Bhaiya will probably be doing whatever he's supposed
whatever
to be
bhaiyas
doing.
do, yes. Bachelor bhaiyas.
This is exactly what we are talking about for centuries, like what you were talking about and you. So we have these structures, this patriarchal system, and that is why a woman has not been able to come along with the men to the start line, right? So, and that is why it is precisely for that reason that we need the reservations, because if we don't have that, though it does, you're absolutely right, and so are you absolutely right, because special treatment, preferential treatment means you're not equal. I mean, I need special thing. Why, if I'm in a DTC bus, I'm an able-bodied woman, why would I get up? You know, I mean, a guy, I mean, I'm sorry, of a guy, then why would I have to get up to give a seat to a woman?
Correct.
So the bottom line is that if you are asking for equal treatment, then you've got to give it what it takes. And it is precisely for the centuries of patriarchy, etc., that we need the reservation for the woman. I mean, we have to open the doors of the house for them to be able to get out and to go for a job, unless the doors are not open, and the doors get open only through reservations. If we didn't have that, we would be where we are. The special push in 1993, then we had a certain percentage of women. I mean, seats are reserved for them, so they can get out. So we need that. But I do not mean to say that the reservations have to go on forever, for eternity. It has to be till we all reach the level of, yeah, absolutely, a level playing field, or we all come to the start, and from there, when we all reach up, and that could be 15 years, 20 years, once we reach that line, then may the best person win.
Okay, but since talking about the now, she talked about reservations in public transport. Do you want a women's compartment in the metro?
Yeah, so that's what I was talking to you earlier about,
Yes.
right? Like the metro, you want that reserved compartment because, like, when you travel with the men, you don't feel safe. Like, I don't feel safe if I don't have like my brother or like, you know, some other man traveling with me. I would definitely go to the women's compartment because, like, you don't want someone coming up to you and filling you up. Like, the men feel it's their right, they can do it.
Yeah.
But okay, I'm not saying that women don't. Women can also be staring, like, it's fine, like, they also do it. It's not like they don't. But 90 or 99% of the times, you don't feel safe in that compartment because you know someone will come and like fill you up. And how many times are you going to scream? Right? How many times are you going to make a ruckus? Then you just rather go and sit in the reserved compartment and feel safe and have that 30 minutes of, like, you know, calm time and not like paranoia that, oh my god, he's going to come and touch me, oh my god, he's going to come and like flick my wallet or something like that, right?
And
So, but wallets can be flicked in the women's
adding to that, it's interesting that the amount of noise that we have when there is a women's only space.
Yes.
And I'm sure you realize it since you are, doing this show. I mean, think about it. When she's talking about it, it suddenly occurred to me that till the 1920s, until the suffragette movement took place, women were not allowed to vote. They were also not allowed to step out in public life.
Yes, there are countries where they are not allowed to drive.
And there are, even today, there are exclusively institutions with spaces for men. And you don't hear us saying, oh, this is unfair. And this has gone on generationally. I mean, there was a time when clubs did not allow women to become members. Full members. You had to be a dependent member, right? And at that point in time, it was talked about, oh, we need a space, a specific space that should be there. But currently, we are sitting at a time when there is also gender fluidity. And I think it's important to keep in mind that this has to go beyond people who support. And I'm also of the view that it's not that feminism is about a man or a woman.
Hold that thought. I'm going to come back to you. We just need to take a quick break, but we're going to come back and continue this conversation. So stay with us. Hello and welcome back to We Women Want. Today we are taking a new look at an old debate, reservations versus equality. But before the break, Talish, you brought us something very interesting, gender fluidity. If you could, complete that thought. I interrupted you midway.
Right. So gender fluidity is something where we recognize that a person is born, and this was held in a Supreme Court judgment in 2014, you are born with what is known as a sex. So therefore you could be male, you could be female, you could be intersex. However, gender is a social construct. And therefore, one can choose to be whichever gender we choose to be. And gender comes in a spectrum. Now, given all of these things that are taking place, the very fact is that anybody who actually tries to even identify in the spectrum of women often finds themselves again at the receiving end of this entire thing about why do women need a space for themselves? Well, no, women don't need a space for themselves. But the fact is, can you make your safe spaces safer for us? I don't need a women's only park.
Exactly.
But the fact is, can I go out in the park without the fear of threat of molestation, rape, or even murder? Crime against women is actually at an all-time high. We can't go out on the streets and run around on the streets. Not that anybody has a wish to, but just the choice to.
Yeah.
Therefore, we are not demanding these things. We are not asking for them. I mean, the fact is that the entire structure of society has been unable to render the metro safe enough for you.
Exactly.
And therefore there's a space that has been given basically because they're saying they're so sorry,
this is
move
not going to
there.
be safe, so you rather just sit there.
You rather just sit there. So it demeans us as well.
Yeah.
But are there some traditions that you feel are now have changed with the times, or women themselves are asserting themselves?
No, in fact, I saw this thing in which the Mangal Sutra, the woman put it on that and the guy put it back. The bride touched the feet of the bridegroom, and the bridegroom then touched the feet of the so
bride,
it is, exactly.
It is.
So it is
I
getting
think that
there.
depends. So it depends on the person you are, like the way you've been brought up. Okay, what your parents teach you. If your parents teach you from like day one that you have to respect women, you have to treat them equal, that is the notion you will grow up with. That is the way you will treat your wife, that is the way you will treat other women, right? But if like your mother or like your parents or your grandparents or whoever you've been brought up with treat you as the superior being and your sister or like your other siblings as like the inferior being, it is something that is like in you, right? So if my brother has always been taught that if there is chicken, he gets that and I just get the gravy, he will assume that he is the superior being, right? It's not his fault entirely. It is the upbringing that is the problem here. So reservation needs to be a grassroots and your upbringing needs to change. So if you have been brought up in a way that you respect society, you respect women, they don't need reservation that ways, right? If you've been brought up in a way that you've been told that, okay, fine, you have to earn, you have to work well, but so does your sister, you will respect your wife when she says, I want to go and work. You will not be like, no, you sit at home and cook food. You will like share those responsibilities, you will help her out, you will understand that, okay, fine, getting a maid or getting someone to help you out in the house is not just extra kharcha, it is something that is required because both of you are outside. Someone needs to cook, right? If you can't help her out, if she is working till like 11 a.m., like 11 p.m. in the night, then someone needs to help her out, right? It's not like she is just a demanding person sitting at home and, you know, like eating grapes on the bed. She needs that.
Okay, so basically there is, I mean, of course there is certain physical roles that have been assigned. The woman will bear the child and, you know, do the initial.
That is natural, right?
That's
You
a
can't
biological
expect
function.
the man to
It's a
do it.
It's a biological function.
Yeah.
And having said that, that biology can't be used against us, which currently in the structural format it is. I'll tell you the smallest of challenges that are there. It took a court case for a woman to put down her name as the guardian in a school form.
Yeah.
Right? So that was one. These are the structural formats that are there, which have been in existence.
So that is where the judiciary comes in. You see, that is why we have the Maternity Act, which makes it easier for women to work. So these are the enactments and the legislature that is giving us a lot of scope for us to be able to become what we should have been like many, many centuries back.
But
so
if you
this is
see,
what I'm
sorry,
saying.
cutting you, but if you see the flip side of it,
Yeah.
there's a Maternity Act. The people expect that the women will take like say a year off, 6 months off, how many ever months off. But at the same time, if you see equality, it's expected of the man to get back to work within like a month and, you know, be the breadwinner.
Yeah.
What if he wants to be the stay-at-home
Yeah, I
dad?
was going to
no,
bring
no,
that point.
no,
That
no, no, but there
sometimes,
have been instances.
That's what I was leading up to.
But there have been instances where under the Maternity Act, the paternity, the husband also can take off and look after
But
the
like if
child.
you
But
see
some
society,
women don't want
yeah.
to stay at home. Some women, you know, we just assume that she's a woman, so she will
She
be
wants
with the
to. Maybe she wants to
mothering.
go
But
back
then
to
there are
work.
Some
certain
women
households-
want to
Guy
work
doesn't.
and
If
the
I-
guy.
But then there are husbands who
Yeah,
are
but if
staying
I
back
can-
to look after the
if
child.
I
That's
can-
what, but
if
what
I can-
I'm trying to say is that the husbands who are staying back
Yes.
are not like that much
Majority.
in number.
Can
Yeah,
I,
not
A,
in
can I
majority,
sort of
of
just
course.
sum it up? You
Yeah.
see, when we look at feminism, which is in my considered opinion, a movement where all genders are equal. That's it. Inconsequential of who the follower of that philosophy is. But when we look now at the various stages of feminism, we're currently at a stage of feminism which is also known as the fourth wave, and at that point we're talking about pro-choice and what it enables us. So pro-choice in that sense and patriarchy also harms the men massively.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
that's what
never,
I'm trying to
I'm not taking that away. I mean, you just have to look at the lines outside a jewelry shop on Karwa Chauth. What is a person to do if he cannot
Right.
afford to go by those norms?
Yeah.
So patriarchy harms the men, as well,
well.
but they are co-opted into it because largely it is advantageous to them.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's
in
why
fact,
it's not equal, because if the man chooses to sit at home, society doesn't look at it as
That's
in
true
a very
also.
positive manner. So somewhere equality is required for men as well.
Yeah, so
like
the-
fine, maybe
yeah.
they don't require the reservation, but they require the acceptance from society that it is okay to choose to sit at
The
home.
validation.
It is okay to not be able to like buy gold every Karwa Chauth, right? Maybe the girl earns more, maybe she does not like gold. Like it's not something that you have to do. So there are pressures on men as well, and that also again is because at the grassroots level there is no equality.
Yeah,
like
and
your
also,
upbringing
yeah,
doesn't
but
bring out
also,
equality.
also to sort of enumerate upon the theme that you briefly touched upon, which is, you know, when you're talking about not just grassroots, but also sort of differentiating, I think we all acknowledge that we are sitting here as women of privilege.
Yes.
And even in that privilege, we need to acknowledge what is the representation of women right at the top, the seats on the table.
In the board.
Whether we look at the parliament, whether we look at the judiciary, whether we look at the
Companies,
army,
the companies
the
act,
companies,
yes.
every place. And in fact, there's even a term for it called the mantle. And I remember that there used to be a Twitter handle which would actually sort of point out the mantle. The gender pay disparity is very real. There are people who actually track it and sort of shame out companies. Some companies which actually say that they're paying women equal. They treat women equally, and it turns out, oh no, women are paid far lesser than average salaries that are there. So when we look at all of these factors, I think it also becomes then important for us as women of privilege to lead the way and show the way. And therefore
But
the
we
women
don't
don't have a compulsion. We don't have there is no compulsion in that sense that I need to travel in the reserve compartment of the women's compartment.
that even
not
a woman of
compulsion,
privilege
but
will want
it's a
to- yeah,
necessity.
it is
That
a
is
necessity, yeah.
Because we can't ignore the fact that historically that we have been at a disadvantage. So to undo that, to
You
undo
need
the
that extra
social
advantage.
injustice, we have to have the reservation. But like I said, but not forever, it has to be for 15, 20, 30 years. What the legislatures would think in their wisdom would be the best way of going about it, but the reservation has to be there, because if they are not there, the women can never be in that position to be able to rightly and in a justly, and in terms of equity, like you said, to be able to compete with a man. And unless you don't have that, there's no way that she's going to be able to stand up to the man. There's no denying the fact that we are equal. It's enshrined in the Constitution.
But quickly, I just want to end and ask you one question, all of you, because I was joking in the beginning of the show, we have one wedding planner and two divorce planners here. In divorce cases, who gets the edge, the woman or the man? Are laws treated in such a way that why is it that the women have...
That's an interesting question. You see, the laws, in my opinion and in my experience, laws are made in a certain way that they are made to favor the woman, because, like, for example, she's the weaker gender, so-called, but she's not. In my opinion, she's not. But in the end, it's always the guy, it's always the husband who always has an upper hand.
Because you see, the judicial system,
because of the economic situation.
Because of the
It's
economic
basically just
situation,
economic.
as well as the fact that justice in India takes a long time, the justice delivery process.
But also why?
Therefore, it punishes anyone who may not have the upper hand to be able to spend that
But
kind
why
of
does
money.
a guy have an upper hand, Tanisha? That is an important. Why does a man invariably have an upper hand? It's always the woman. And the laws, we've got to admit, are inclined towards the woman. But in spite of that, it's always the woman who's running from a court to court to court.
Or is that
Why?
because it makes a better narrative on a Hindi movie
no,
screen?
no,
Because
no,
it's
it's
actually
just
the
the
system.
system.
It's a
the
fact.
system.
While
It's a
we
fact,
have
and
some
that's
of
the
the
way
best
it is.
laws for women, it remains a fact
That is not implemented on the ground.
it is difficult for them. And again, those barriers. For example, we have laws. Yeah, we have laws where you have women who can go to a police station. But let's ask a woman, does she want to step into a police station? Because let's not forget, Mathura did happen in India.
No,
The
we've
Mathura
had
rape.
shows
Yes.
on the women and the police station where, going to the police station is a bigger trial for the rape victim than perhaps the crime itself.
But there again comes, that's a favorable thing, and that is what we should say. Reservation, maybe just have family courts only for women, going that, so it's
And
expeditious.
women police stations, which
Yes.
have also now been
Yeah,
implemented.
exactly.
Which are being
towards the
So again, the
implemented.
reservation
Yes,
again.
yes. But
So it's
present
needed.
to sort of
It's
also
needed
tell you, the
for a
Nirbhaya
certain
fund
period of time.
hasn't been used all this while. You
Good
might
point.
create it, but it is not utilized.
That's the thing. It's actually in practice also. You may have the laws, but what happens on the ground is also
Implementation.
implementation is equally important. So thank you so much for this conversation, and hope to have you all back at another date. But that's all for now. Thank you for watching.
Thank you,
this show.
Priya.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.